Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Garbage Time Takes. I'm Derek. As always, with me today is my co-host Bobby.
Bobby.
And as you can see, Dennis is absent for the second time in 3 weeks, which is, you know, it's a true shame, Bob. But unfortunately, it's come to be expected that Dennis has priorities that reign supreme over talking shop with his boys. So I see you have a fantastic background again today, solid 9.2 out of 10 in my own professional opinion, Bob. Why does Dennis do this to us and the fans?
You know, I can only put conjecture on the board at this point, but I I'm just so sad that our dear friend Dennis Weaver would abandon us in our time of need. And
For the second time in 3 weeks.
I mean, sure. I mean, if he wants to keep bailing and give us a storyline to bring the fans, I get it. But I mean, we'd love to have him here. And Dennis, if you need a leave of absence, let us know. You know, if it's some you can't commit to, let us know. We love you all the
People think
same.
him all the time.
We love you all the same. And who knows? Maybe he'll wake up and join us at some point during the pod. You never know. But till that morning comes, or till that moment comes, I'd rather, we shall see.
Perhaps Dennis just needs a trip to the good old paternity list, like MLB players do often.
I
And
mean,
do
he's got a fantasy football draft tomorrow that I do know. So for all we know, he could be in a drunken stupor at this point. Rallying himself, getting the creative juices flowing for trying to decide what his team will look like tomorrow. But I mean,
Correct.
I really got no information outside of that.
Yeah. Well, as always, the show will and must go on, and so me and Bob are gonna give it to you guys. Even though Dennis
A
has
lot to
failed.
talk about. A lot to talk about.
There is a lot to talk about, and it would have been far more enjoyable if Dennis decided he was going to join us. But you can only control what you can control, and what me and Bobby can control is giving you guys the best show we possibly can. So, with that, we'll start with the big news of yesterday. The Donovan Mitchell trade, Bob. It finally happened. Danny Ainge selling off, everyone in Utah for picks, just like he did with Boston to build them into what they are now. Um, your thoughts on the return for Utah, and who do you think won the trade, Bob? Because Cleveland, they gave up a significant, amount of talent.
I think that this is one of the few rare occasions, and unfortunately, I think they're kind of becoming more common now, but where the team, in my opinion, that got the best player lost the trade. Um, I I mean, this is just my personal take, but I'm not that high on Donovan Mitchell. I understand he's a good player, but he's had a good team around him for basically his whole tenure in Utah, or at least recent history, and they haven't done too much. I mean, Rudy. I mean, I would expect that. To be honest, though, I would expect they would have gotten more back for Donovan Mitchell, considering that I would have thought his market value would have been higher than Rudy Gobert, and everybody knows what they got back for him, which was a fleecing and a stealing and a robbery. But Danny Ainge is just working his magic again. Gets back Cleveland's first, the player that they took in the first round this past draft, 3 unprotected picks, which, I mean, who knows what those will turn out to be. Probably, assuming Cleveland stays good, not super high, and a couple other solid players back in return. I mean, they're rebuilding in Utah, but they've got a nice young core to build around, and they still got guys that are going to demand value on the open market, like Jordan Clarkson, I believe, is still in Utah, and is it Bogdan Bogdanovich?
Yeah, Bogdan.
Yeah, Bogdan Bogdanovich. He's one of them is in Utah, and a lot of people want him. And so if they ended up shipping out those guys too, the amount of draft picks that the Utah Jazz have accumulated is just simply ridiculous. And the OKC Thunder, for that matter. I mean, I've been seeing stats like that ridiculous numbers picks that they've accumulated. But for Cleveland, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, if you think that Donovan Mitchell is a superstar, which I think that they're banking on the fact that he is a superstar, certainly very, very good player. No, don't get me wrong there. They think that he's going to take them to the promised land. I just don't. I don't know. I don't. It's more of like a believe. I gotta see it to believe it kind of thing with this Cleveland roster. I think they've got a lot of nice pieces, but I just don't know if, potentially Donovan Mitchell being the best player on your team is good enough to get you where you want to go. And it's not necessarily that they don't have pieces around him to make a nice team. It's just that I look at the teams that they're going to compete with at the top of the East, and I'm like, do I really put Cleveland over the top at this point? Probably not, but they could prove me wrong.
Yeah, I actually thought Cleveland probably got off with a better deal than perhaps Utah could have asked for. I mean, Lauri Markkanen's good, but Evan Mobley and Jared Allen are your top two guys, at the 4-5 position. Colin Sexton's all right, but is he worth 4 years, $72 million? I don't know. And clearly, him and Darius Garland.
Now when you have Darius Garland, he's not worth.
Correct. Him and Darius Garland just never really seemed to establish the chemistry required to, have a solid, point guard, shooting guard relationship there. And maybe now that Donovan Mitchell is in the fold instead of Colin Sexton, that play from that, area of the floor improves. But like you said, 3 unprotected firsts, and if Cleveland is going to be good for, quite some time, once you get towards, at least in my opinion, once you get towards the end of the first round, pretty much everything becomes a second round pick at that point. Once you get past 22, 23, pretty much everything is a second round pick. And so, whether or not those picks happen to, fall into the lottery, I would be very surprised, because Cleveland showed that they were a pretty capable team last year, even with some of the deficiencies in the roster. So I think it works out well for Cleveland. And considering they weren't going to extend Colin Sexton anyway, Lauri Markkanen probably isn't a significant piece moving forward. And their first round pick, I think it's Ochai Agbaji from Kansas, unproven player, 22 years old for a rookie. It feels relatively risk free for Cleveland, and I can see how they came out on top. What else I wanted to ask you about, Bob, is we seem to have been joined by our good friend Dennis. So before I bring up this next part, Bob, Dennis, how nice of you to join us. We thought for sure you were going to bail on us for the second time in 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's really great that we accommodate everyone else's schedule except mine. So I really appreciate that as we get started here. I'm glad I could take some time and join you just at the drop of a hat and at Derek's whim, basically. I'm happy that I can be.
Well, Dennis, you had Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to propose your own scheduled date to do a podcast, and you were radio silent. And so I thought,
as were both of you.
Correct. And as such, if you're not going to provide us with a schedule of when you're available, then I guess you are just going to have to be on my, women call.
Well, the problem is Derek's schedule of availability is so incredibly tiny, and we could never do a podcast without Derek, but Dennis is disposable, so we can do a podcast without Dennis. We can't do one without Derek, though.
You are more than welcome to do a podcast without me, but never have I ever seen either of you two ask what day is a good day to do a podcast other than me. So, I mean, if you guys want to do a podcast,
I feel like we've asked that before.
If you guys want to do podcasts at 3 or 4 p.m. Eastern while I'm still stuck in classes, by all means, go for it. But, I like to think that I'm sort of, am responsible for the scheduling, and unfortunately, I would have proposed.
That's certainly
last
true.
night.
That's certainly true.
I would have proposed. I would have proposed a podcast for last night, but I was, working on my application for supplemental funding for my research lab. And that was something my PI wanted me to get to her by the end of the day today. So unfortunately, I was busy yesterday, and I knew we couldn't go a week without giving the people what they wanted, especially right before the first big college football Saturday of the season. So I said, podcast tonight. And Dennis said, I'm back in Cincinnati because I spend more time in Cincinnati than I do in Villanova, where I'm supposed to be for grad school. And, but we're happy to have you, Dennis. We're happy to have you. Thank you for finding some time in your very busy schedule preparing for your fantasy football draft.
It's good to be here. I kid and tease, of course, but at the end of the day, I am in complete agreement that we have to give the people what they want. And so that's why I've taken the time. I know that people know I'm busy as well. And so, I hope that the people also appreciate me, showing up here. What am I, like 10 minutes in probably at this point, but I'm here and accounted for.
Yeah, closer to 20, but yeah.
Okay, well,
we've been recording for 11 minutes, so...
I also heard there was some NBA talk. I wouldn't have been able to factor into that anyway, so it's all good.
And Dennis, on the 1% chance that you are going to join us, that is why I decided to start off with the NBA first. Because I knew that's not quite in your domain, and so if you happen to join us somewhere along the way, that wouldn't be a discussion that you missed out on.
I appreciate that, 100%.
But we're glad you're here, Dennis. You were obviously here with us in spirit, based on background.
elaborately here in spirit. I do appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely.
There's very few people that are able to meet the gaze of Leonardo DiCaprio, Dennis. So you should consider yourself fortunate.
I guess I am in a special category of people then, a special group. That's great.
Well,
I see that the backgrounds are just getting more and more elaborate every time that you start a podcast and I'm not here. So I don't know, if this happens again, I just don't even know what to expect at that point. How do you do
correction, Dennis? When this happens again, I'm sure Bobby will step up his game.
Bobby, let's plan on doing one next week around 2 p.m. Eastern time every day, and then we'll amp up the backgrounds on Derek, and we'll see what we can.
Trust me, I am locked and loaded. I already got one in reserve for you, Dennis, and we can. I'm sure we can whip up something with Derek too. Don't worry. The Microsoft Paint will be rolling like nobody's business.
I would certainly hope so.
I mean,
but yeah, just to wrap up, the NBA talk, Bob, I wanted to get your thoughts on how the Jazz were able to leapfrog the Knicks to make this deal. The reports have come out that basically Utah wanted R.J. Barrett, Quentin Grimes, and 3 first-round picks, 2 unprotected, and the third unprotected. Or no, 2 unprotected and 1 top 5 protected. But the Knicks did not want to include Quentin Grimes and instead wanted to include Emmanuel Quickley, but the Utah Jazz wanted 3 unprotected firsts instead of 2. So what do you think about the Knicks valuing Quentin Grimes to the point where they were unable to part with him for Donovan Mitchell?
I mean, if I'm the New York Knicks, I don't give a... I mean, if I'm the New York Knicks, I don't even know why I need Donovan Mitchell. I mean, to sell tickets, maybe? But, come on. If you're the New York Knicks, if you add Donovan Mitchell to your team, you're not going anywhere quick. You're going nowhere slow. Still, if you're the New York Knicks. I mean...
Bob, does a backcourt of Jalen Brunson and Donovan Mitchell not strike fear into your very heart?
No, not at all. Not at all. That screams to me second round of the playoffs maximum. And
but
a
big
6
3. Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, Donovan Mitchell, big 3.
Well,
you're telling me they're not a finals contender.
Well, the Knicks are trying to get rid of Julius Randle because he had one good year. They gave him a massive contract, and he turned right back into buns.
Correct.
I mean,
Classic Nick Silver.
I mean, there's been talk of him getting traded to the Lakers for a swap for Russell Westbrook, if that says anything. So, I mean, if I'm Utah, like, I'm not mad that I made the deal with Cleveland. You're obviously trying to get three. You got the three unprotected, plus you got a young guy. I personally have always really liked Lauri Markkanen. I know he's never really put it together. He's always had an injury bug because he's a very tall, lanky dude. But when he has put it together, he's been very, very good. So I understand why they wanted him. But like you said, Derek, it makes sense why they would want to trade him, given the fact that they have two other guys that are more than suitable to play down low. But once again, I hope Cleveland does something, because I'm all for smaller market teams like Cleveland. I'm showing up. But we'll see. I hope I hope that they actually get matched up against the Nets and then they bounce them. That's what I'm going to hope for. Let's go, Cleveland.
Fair enough.
This one's for you, baby.
Just in case Dennis has to bounce early, we want to make sure we bring him into the fold here. Some big news today: college football playoff expansion. Dennis, I'm sure you saw the news in your wildly busy schedule, as you so eloquently put it yourself. 12 teams coming by 2026. Dennis, I guess we'll start off with you. What do you think about the CFP expansion? Is it too many teams, just the right amount of teams? What are your thoughts on the format and the timing?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the notification, so I did know it was going to 12 teams. I didn't read much about the actual format. So if somebody could fill me in quickly on that, I think that'd be appreciative. But just some general comments. I would say 12 teams feels like a lot to me. I think that they needed to be some expansion. I was personally really pulling for an 8-team playoff. But, I mean, there's a lot of different ways they can do it. How are they deciding to break down in terms of, like, the format of the 12 teams? Do you know?
Correct. So from what I understand, the top 4 buys will be the top-ranked conference champions. So basically the same as the prior CFP, but instead of like Georgia being in the top 4, Baylor would have been the number 4 seed because they were the last.
Right. You do have to be a conference champion. Yeah.
You have to be a conference champion to be a top 4 seed with a bye, correct? And then the rest of the field is just the next highest ranked teams in order from 5 to 12. And so the matchups would be 12 versus 5, 11, 6, 10, 7, 9, 8. And then very in the same exact vein as March Madness, the 1 seed is going to play the winner of the 8-9, the 2, the 7-10, the 3, the 6-11, the 4, the 5-12. So pretty much identical sort of setup to college basketball in that sense, but the top 4 buys are reserved for conference champions, and then they're ranked in the college football playoff ranking order.
Okay, so they've basically added 2 rounds of games then.
Right.
From the 4 team now. So instead of just the 2,
Right.
the semifinal and the final, there is a first round, a second round, and then they have the semifinal and the final
Right.
championship game. So that's a big change. I mean, if we're being honest, that is a big jump. They initially just had the NCAA championship game, which was just essentially a bowl, and then they expanded it to the multitude of 4 teams that it's been for the last however many years, which people were like, literally, like, that's the smallest expansion you could have made in terms of making a playoff. But it was a good place to start, and in my personal opinion, it's needed to be changed for a while because I'm just sick of, and I know, luckily my UC Bearcats last year were so, good that they actually got to break the trend a little bit. But I'm so sick of Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, and it changes out a little bit. But I think that this format, provides an opportunity for, even if Cincinnati, let's say last year they weren't as good as they were and they ended up, being ranked 6 or 7, they would have had a chance still. And I think that that's only right. That's just kind of the way I think about it. I think it brings more eyes on the playoff because you have now more schools and more fan bases that are going to be engaged. Because even if you can get that 12 seed, you're telling me there's a chance, like
Hmm.
so you're telling me there's a chance, and those fan bases and students and schools are going to cling to that chance, even if it's slim to none as an 11 or 12 seed. So I like it. I do think it's borderline too many because people are probably going to bring up the argument now that you're devaluing all of the other bowls and no one's going to watch any of the other bowls. But maybe it's just me. I didn't really watch them anyway. So I guess I'd rather have those as part of the playoff. That's just more interesting to me.
True. I think what's also interesting is the conference champion. It's two things. The conference champion requirement essentially eliminates Notre Dame from ever being a top four seed, which I thoroughly enjoy because Notre Dame thinks they're better than everyone else and can stay independent. So screw you, Notre Dame. And then also, it's going to prevent the top four teams always being two SEC teams and then the rest.
Yes.
I think that's, pretty significant and much needed to avoid having multiple conference representatives in the top four. And so
And
last
also,
year,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I was just going to say that it, in the same vein, really puts so much value now on some of the bigger conference championship games,
Right.
because you're playing, instead of the difference between, I don't know, we're going to be 2 or 3 anyway, and we might just flip flop. It's a first round bye, and the other team is going to be, dropped to a 5 or 6 and have to play an extra game. And that's significant. And so these SEC championship, Big 12, Big 10 championships, those are going to be really, really fun and engaging games to watch now, even more so than they have been.
Correct. And I think you can, as with everything, money, I think, was the ultimate motivator here.
For sure.
I mean, you can just imagine with 4 rounds instead of 2, all for a playoff for the national championship, how much revenue that is going to generate for, the teams involved and the NCAA.
Over the course of, I would imagine, a month, right? I mean, this is going to be
Correct.
kind of drawn out over several weeks now. And so you get to, hype this up. Advertising and all that kind of stuff is now going to be in play.
Money talks, baby. Bob, what do you think? Is 12 a good number?
I'll reserve my judgment on that, I guess, until I actually see it happen. I like the idea of a Cinderella story, and you get more of an opportunity for that with a 12-team playoff. I mean, every team will be good,
Correct.
but I'm thinking, my initial reaction, honestly, to seeing this news was, man, Cincinnati should have just stayed in the American Conference. Because now every single year there would have been room for a team like Cincinnati who would have been I don't know, undefeated, or run the table. And, they have a room for that team. Now it's now we don't have to be are they good enough to compete with the top 4? Do they deserve it? Or do we go with the 1 or 2 loss super good SEC school that just missed it? Now they're going to be room for both of them. So I mean. I really. Well, go ahead.
I disagree because we're going to be in the Big 12 championship game fighting for a bye. So, so now it actually gives us none of the winning the American would never get you a top 4.
What was last year?
Yeah, last year I suppose that would have been an exception, but rarely. And the American moving forward without Houston, without Central Florida, if UC would have stayed put, just that fake scenario. I mean, that's just the Americans a disaster. And so now,
I mean,
it's even worse than it was.
Even with Houston and Central Florida. But I mean, we don't really need to elaborate too much on that. I mean, I don't know. I like to see. I hope that with this expansion, we get to see more teams like what UC was last year. And, I hope we get to see, teams that were, super good. They might not be in the top conference, but they had a super great season. And, maybe they ran...
Coastal Carolina would have made it in 2020 if this was the...
Western Michigan a few years ago.
Exactly. Something like that, where it's sure, that's what I mean by, a Cinderella story. It's a team like Nether gets the buzz like that, and like they have a chance to go up against like the big guns. Like they would have been a team that would have been scheduled by one of those other teams to like punch on in like the non-conference schedule, and now here they are like top of the table like with a chance.
And the fun thing about it, I think that's all super valid. The fun thing about it for me is even if that team, that Cinderella team or whatever they are, that's 10-11, they could beat the 6-7 seed. Like they're not immediately going up against Alabama or Ohio State, or like they have a chance to actually win a game, build some more hype and excitement, and everyone goes, oh, I don't know, maybe they could actually do it, just for like an extra week until they get blown out of the water. So, like the way it was right now, UC goes in as the 4, and everybody knows that they're about to get rolled pretty much. But given those teams, like you said, Bobby, a Cinderella story, a chance to win one game in a playoff format, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. I think time will tell whether 12 is too much. I always thought 8 was a really good number, but
yeah, me too.
Like to Bob's credit, 12 teams, I think what it'll also do is make it a lot easier for the rankings to actually there won't be so much hotly contested debate about the rankings, because the top 12 teams, if you're not good enough to get into the top 12, then you're just not good enough to get into the top 12. It's a very different story than arguing like 4, 5, 6.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually a pretty clear distinction of the teams that are top 10 and the teams that are 10 through 15. And, I think this will take a lot of, the politics out of it, where, the surrounding stigma was, oh, the CFP is always going to put in 2 SEC teams because it makes the most money. I think those types of things will be eliminated, and, there's going to be a lot more money to go around college football, which only helps everyone.
Yeah, that's a great point. I completely agree. The line between 4-5 has always been so contested. And it's like, oh, they hate my school. They hate, whatever, because they left us out. And the line between 12 and 13 is like, okay, you just weren't good enough. Like,
yeah,
be better. Like the line is a little less, crucial, I would say.
I agree. Speaking of not only, college football playoff expansion, something that, the 3 of us have been, looking for an opportunity to talk about for a while is league expansion. SEC, Big Ten, and like you mentioned, the Big 12, even though that's a couple years old now. Big Ten bringing in USC, UCLA, could be bringing in Washington, Oregon, SEC bringing in Texas, Oklahoma. There's the dominoes have not all fallen, I don't think. And with, especially now, a new expanded college football playoff format, things could get much wilder, I think. So I didn't know if you guys had any thoughts, I guess starting with Bob, about bringing, USC and UCLA into the fold.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, as far as I'm concerned, another 2 punching bags. But, I think it's, a very logical move from the Big Ten standpoint. You now give full east to west coverage for your league. USC and UCSC and UCLA are 2 pretty storied schools when it comes to college football, when it comes to athletics in general. So I'm glad that those were the 2 teams that we ended up getting, or they ended up making deals with.
Yeah, they have enough prestige, but they're not quite at the level, at least in football, to where you really got to worry about them.
Correct. But
yeah.
Also, they're going to add a lot of that. They at least have, some sports teams in all of them that are like solid. So, they're definitely going to be competing for. I'll be interested to see where they end up, like division wise, when they actually like get put in, or if like when that happens, just like a realignment of, what teams
Hopefully.
are in what division.
Hopefully.
I would hope, but I think that's kind of the part that I'm most intrigued is that like when you add teams like this, are you going to then change up the entire fold, or you just kind of like say like, oh, these are the teams that we have, like we're just gonna plop this team here and plop this like one on each side, like, and then whatever. But I hope I'm really intrigued about it. I think it'll be a little awkward at first because like it was with when Rutgers came in and all that kind of stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
I really don't know. Like I really don't know anything about Rutgers. Like I don't really care about them.
Rutgers, Nebraska, Maryland.
But I will say like those schools, I was like, okay, like what do I like? Who are these schools? But like with USC, UCLA, I know what they represent. That's the difference with them. It's like, okay, like I know USC will be good at this. I know UCLA will be good at this. And so it's kind of like I already have a clear idea of what to expect from those teams coming in here. Whereas like just me personally as a fan, I didn't really have much of an idea of what like Rutgers was doing or what Maryland was doing or something like that before they actually joined.
Yeah, I think even outside of football, basketball, I think is going to get much more competitive. As a current Arizona Wildcat, I've been able to witness the Pac-12 after dark, but on the West Coast at a normal time. And so I've seen USC and UCLA basketball in action, and I think definitely in basketball they'll provide additional contenders to the Big Ten championship every year. What I thought was funny about USC especially joining was Lincoln Riley getting out of Oklahoma because he's soft and didn't want to deal with an SEC schedule. And then the board of reagents out in LA were like, screw you, Lincoln Riley, we'll just go to the Big Ten then. And so I think that'll be really interesting. Lincoln Riley went through like 3 conferences in 3 years because he went from Big 12 and then he would have been going to the SEC and now he's going to the Big 10. So who knows what, USC will turn out to be. But one thing I was really hoping for, I sort of told you guys about this off air a couple weeks ago, is I really want to see USC and MSU become like a premier rivalry. Spartans versus Trojans, really ancient sort of, war history there. And I mean, the colors on the field, green and white versus red and yellow, is just it's going to be beautiful. I think USC's got a chance to develop a lot of rivalries with the Big Ten teams because, especially in football, Michigan's been to the Rose Bowl quite a few times. Ohio State's been in the Rose Bowl quite a few times. And so bringing back some of those, classic Rose Bowl matchups and getting them hopefully on an annual basis, I think that's going to be something pretty cool. Dennis, any thoughts on the Big Ten? And then you can segue into, what you think about UC joining the Big 12 as well, if you'd like. You mentioned it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, you guys both brought up some good points there. To Bobby's thing about the realignment, this is just me kind of guessing here. I would imagine that you're bringing them both into the West and kicking 2 teams from the West into the East, or there's some sort of change where you're adding we're at 16 teams now in the Big Ten, right?
Correct.
So that's a lot to have, 8 and 8. Maybe that's how they do it. Maybe they try to have some sort of breakdown with the third division. So I don't know how they do that, but I would think that they would want to keep, speaking of rivalries, USC and UCLA in the same section.
I would think
I don't think they're going to go 1-1 because that doesn't make any sense to split up the 2 West Coast teams that already have a rivalry. So that part, I think you got to keep them together and then have them develop those rivalries with the schools in the Big Ten that you already alluded to, Derek. And I think that that's going to be a cool part of it. I think in basketball, especially right now, it's really intriguing because USC, UCLA, both big programs. You get to deal with Mick Cronin, my boy. Now, every year, Pep Cronin will be in attendance at U of M, at Michigan State, throughout the Midwest. The HEP Tour.
Oh, no.
The HEP Tour is coming in. So, yeah, check out my boy Hep Cronin. He will be cheering from the sidelines way up in the stands somewhere, and the camera will not be able to be taken off of him. I just hope that the Big Ten doesn't hire, what's his name? The ESPN late night Pac-12 guy. Bill.
Dennis, don't tell me you're hating on Bill Walton.
Bill Walton. Just leave him in the Pac-12. He cannot start broadcasting Big Ten games.
I will not tolerate the Bill Walton slander. I'm going to have to cut you off and encourage you to talk about UC because Bill Walton slander will not be tolerated. But fortunately for you, I'm pretty sure he's retired now.
Oh, okay, Derek, I thought we've talked about this. I thought you also joined in on the Bill Walton slander before. What is
I
this
think Bill
new?
Walton is a terrible analyst and color
He's horrible.
commentator, but the stories he tells and his quotes and his like just absolute chaotic absurdity is must see television.
I get that. Yeah, it's so absurd and just out there that it is a little enjoyable. I'll give you that.
I mean, come on, Bill Walton coming out wearing a schmedium rainbow tie-dye shirt on national television. It's must see TV.
I mean, that's the kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that you've got to have for people to tune in to watch the Pack. I mean,
Correct.
I mean,
No, it's
because
it's
it's
the
just
kind
a
of stuff you
snoozer.
got to have when you know you're not good at what you do, and the only way you can get people to listen to you is by doing outrageous
All right,
things that
Dennis.
people
That's
pay attention
that's
to.
enough. That's enough. Bill Walton slander, Dennis. Oh, you see,
All right, all right.
Dennis. You see in the Big 12. Is that 2023 or 2024?
So next summer is the transition. I think I saw the
Next
date
summer.
is like next June 1st, or maybe it's July 1st is the official date. So by next football season, the University of Cincinnati Bearcats, come fall sports, will be in the Big 12. And the interesting thing about it is it's another year before Texas and Oklahoma jump ship to the SEC. So for 1 year, there's this crossover of, I believe, all
It's
four
going to be
teams
a
joining the Big
massive
12,
conference.
which is UC, Houston, BYU, and UCF, plus Texas, Oklahoma, and then of course you've got TCU, Kansas, Kansas State, et cetera, Baylor, and so that's going to be a
Oklahoma State,
massive
West
conference.
Virginia.
Correct. So that is going to be a really big conference for 1 year, and it'll still be pretty big when Texas and Oklahoma jump, because they brought in four, they're losing two. Obviously, the two that they're losing are high quality programs, and those two are jumping into an even more powerful conference now in the SEC.
But
And
they're
so I
bringing
think-
in a higher quality program in UC, Dennis.
Yeah, they are. And as it sits right now, I think that we would hold our own in that version of the Big 12 in football. I don't necessarily know we would run through it like we run through the American. I'm not going to sit here and say that. Our current basketball program state is yikes in that conference. I mean, competing against the West Virginias, Kansas, especially because the teams that are staying in the Big 12 are the basketball power schools in the Big 12. So that
Correct.
doesn't help us either. And so that is
Texas Tech.
definitely something
Forgot
of
about that, too.
concern. What'd you say? Texas Tech. Yeah, Texas Tech.
Yeah, Texas Tech, Baylor, Kansas.
So I'd be lying if I wasn't concerned about playing Texas Tech, Baylor, and Kansas in basketball every year, because that's not going to be pretty. But in football, I think it makes sense why we're doing it.
Dennis, in their current state, before we move on,
Yeah.
what's UC if they were playing Big 12 basketball this year? Would they go winless in Big 12 basketball conference play?
No, I mean, who else is in the Big 12? Like Kansas State is not like superb. Who else is? I'm forgetting somebody. We could beat a couple of the bottom feeders, but we would get wrecked by some teams too, if we're being honest. And that's also, consider that this move is being made with UCF, Houston, and BYU. I think we beat UCF. I think we hold our own even with Houston. So if you're saying like in a vacuum, UC is only the team, like the only team moving,
True.
maybe, but the other teams moving with us, I think we're right there with those teams, and
Yeah, I
we're
forgot
better than
about-
football.
I forgot about UCF. That you get at least one win there. That's for sure. Bob, do you have any closing thoughts on UC and their prospects in the Big 12?
Dim. That's all I really have to say on that. So we're good to move on to the next topic.
Sure. There was college football last night. Central Michigan University, our alma maters, the three of us, opened up against Oklahoma State.
Covering.
They were extremely competitive for the first 8 minutes of the first quarter, then non-competitive for, 2 quarters, and then stormed back down 58 to like 21 or something like that, or 51-28 or something. It was something very ridiculous, and covered the spread miraculously
Wow.
at 50.
They got a backdoor cover?
Yeah,
Yes.
58 to 44 or something ridiculous like that.
I didn't even check it after the third quarter. I was just done with it.
Yeah, it was yeah. So CMU, and the crazy thing is I'm pretty sure they like turned the ball over on downs with like 4 minutes left, down 14. If they could have scored a touchdown there and made it a one possession game, things could have gotten loose in a hurry. But we had that game. We had the Purdue Penn State game. I don't know if either of you caught that game, but it was one of the worst clock managed games I've ever seen in my entire life. With like 2.5 minutes left, 2nd and 10, Purdue, instead of running the ball, threw the ball, incomplete passes on second and third down. So Penn State burned 0 timeouts and went on to win the game. That was after Penn State threw like a ridiculous pick six because Sean Clifford is staying. And it was Big Ten football at its finest. It was, pretty much everything I expected to see from Penn State. And I think the Purdue bandwagon has probably cooled off a little bit.
I would certainly hope.
But what I really wanted to get thoughts on was Bob and his thoughts on Michigan State versus Western Michigan today. The score ended up being a lot more lopsided than the game was for about 3.5 quarters. Bob, what are your sort of instant reactions to MSU's Week 1 performance?
Want to know, baby. That's all I could say. In reality, was there some sloppiness? Yes, there was some sloppiness. But at the same time, it's the first game of the season, so I don't know how much of that is just, knocking the rust off. I was encouraged. I will say I was encouraged a lot by both sides of the ball for different things. Our defense came up with some pretty timely turnovers when we needed it. When the Broncos were driving, they got into our territory. We knocked the ball loose for a couple fumbles. Got fortunate there, and really, only folded, I believe, 13 points in the end of the day. So 13 points. If you give up 13 points most games, you're gonna be okay. So I can't hate on that too much. Would have I liked to have gotten off the field a few more times, a bit quicker than they did? Yes, but it is what it is. On offense, I was encouraged by a lot of things. I think that some of the running backs that we have, I think we're pretty deep at running back. Just by my first impression for this first game. Berger looked very good most of the night. I believe he went for like 120 yards on the ground tonight. Payne Thorne, he 4 tubs, 1 interception. You can't be too mad about that. He was, 50% completion percentage though. That'll get cleaned up a bit. He did miss some throws that I think he will make in future weeks. So I was a little bit discouraged about some accuracy issues there. But then again, when the MSU offense seemed to strike, we struck quick. And so clearly this team has the same potential as, initial impressions. They have the same potential as last year's team to really hit that quick hitter, long ball touchdown. And you could really feel the momentum shift through the game with MSU. It's like, their offense would look stagnant, a couple possessions, and then the next one they bust one big play, then another big play, then another big play, and all of a sudden it was, a touchdown on the board in a minute off the clock. And Western had like some ridiculous double us up at least in time of possession, which was insane. And they only scored, and we still managed to hold on. But I think we've got a lot of offensive weapons. At least that was my initial impression. Would I like the game to be a little bit more of a blowout, a little bit quicker? Sure. But then I also have to think it's Western Michigan. This is their Super Bowl. kind of thing. So, I think we'll clean it up next week. But overall, 1-0, and we didn't get discouraged when there was plenty of opportunity for our guys to hang their heads, because Western did hang around at some parts of the game.
Bob, is Zippy going to get it handed to him next week?
No, Zippy won't get it handed to him, because that's just kind of the mantra with MSU football. And I was saying this during the game to some people. I was like, it's just kind of an MSU football thing. It doesn't matter who we're playing. We could be playing, I don't know, Lansing Community College, and it would be a nip-tuck game most of the game. We just can't. MSU's never been a program that's just put people away. It's always a game, and then we might, like we did today, bust it loose a couple plays late, and widen the lead a little bit. I mean, I remember during the game, we scored that touchdown to go up like 28-13 or something. I was like, okay, like 6 minutes left. Okay, it's probably over. I don't think Western's coming back.
4th and goal from the 1.
I don't think Western's coming back. We made that long drive there. I flipped the channel to watch the last set of the Serena Williams match, and I flipped back about 10 minutes later, and we're up like another 2 scores, and I'm like, well, what the heck just happened? I was just saying a minute ago that MSU was about to choke their guts out against Western, and sure enough, I'm looking at the play history, and it's like Western Michigan -1 yard, Western Michigan going backwards, and then us busting 50-yard tubs left and right to go back up. So, I mean, that's the thing with MSU. I don't know how many times I heard tonight, transfer from here, showing up massively for us. Like some dude I'd never heard of from UNLV, 4 sacks, like looking like a menace. And of course, transfer from Wisconsin, 100 yards at least. I mean, our team is like duct tape, and
MSU
like
is
retreads from everybody else. I mean, you would wonder why these people were transferring, because they're showing up and showing out at the MSU program. But
to be fair,
it's Western Michigan. I mean, to be fair, it's Western Michigan. Okay, I'll say that. But also 1-0.
What win's a win?
1-0. We looked decent at some parts. I think there's some sloppiness. Our kicker looked horrendous. He's going to clean it up. But 1-0 wins a win.
Win's a win. You're not going to apologize for winning. Dennis, me and you finally get to start our college football seasons tomorrow. As you can see, I'm rocking the GOAT jersey in honor of tomorrow's game. But Dennis, I wanted to start with you, since a couple weeks ago, me and Bob, went through Michigan and Michigan State's schedule. So I don't really have much to say other than expect Michigan to cover. Jim Harbaugh with the crazy news where Cade McNamara is going to have the entirety of week 1, and then J.J. McCarthy is going to get the entirety of week 2. And then week 3, maybe we'll see a quarterback decided on for the rest of the season. Who knows? They often say when you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. We'll see what happens. We had 2 quarterbacks last year, won the Big Ten, went to the college football playoff. So we'll see. But a lot of mouths to feed on the Michigan offense. A lot of uncertainty on the Michigan defense. A lot of people like to say Aiden Hutchinson, David Ojabo, it's going to be hard to replace their production. Michigan was last of the Michigan teams in sacks last year, even with those 2. MSU, CMU, EMU, and WMU all finished above Michigan in sacks last year. And so I expect it to be, defensive pass rush by committee. I'm sure, Michigan defenses have averaged like 34, 36 sacks a season, whether they have first-round talent coming off the edge or not. So expect Michigan to cover, expect Colorado State to get the breaks beat off them early in the third quarter at the latest. But what I really want to hear is Dennis talking about the UC Bearcats traveling to the Deep South, to Arkansas, ranked top 25 matchup to start the year. The Hogs are coming. Woo pig sooie. Dennis, what does UC have to do in the post Desmond Ritter era?
Yeah, I think the two quarterback conversation was actually a perfect segue because at least last I heard, and we talked about this on the last pod, UC still doesn't have a quarterback either. So we have Ben Bryant and Evan Prater. We don't know. I mean, I think there's been an in-house decision made. I think that's really been all indications are that there is a plan for this game that's been put in place, and Luke Fickell and his guys know who's going to be starting, but no one else does, and including the Razorbacks, and that was done intentionally. So I think that is something that is being leveraged correctly. I don't know how much it will actually help us, but I think it's being leveraged correctly. I think if I had to guess, signs point towards Ben Bryant. He just has a little more experience. He's actually started Division I football and is just a little more composed and will be a little calmer in what will be a bit of a tough and raucous environment, I'm imagining, being a top 25 matchup on the road down in the Deep South. And so I think you go with the guy who's just going to have a little more composure, been there before, even if it was at Eastern Michigan, but he's also been on the UC roster and has been in those environments behind Desmond Ritter and has played even in some of those when Desmond wasn't able to play here and there throughout, the 3 years that he sat behind him. So I think that's going to be the guy. We'll see tomorrow. I think that, what UC has to do, they have to get 75% of the defensive production they got last year out of all of these guys who have come in from all over the place, either, and I talked a little bit about it, but secondary is kind of a question mark, losing our safety Brian Cook, and of course, Amon Sauce Gardner. And so there's a lot of young guys. There's a couple of transfers. And if there's a few guys that can step up from those units and give us a solid defensive production, and we actually aren't Swiss cheese, as Bobby likes to say, and Arkansas is not able to just run up and down the field on us and throw all day. And I don't know much about the Razorbacks, but if they have enough offensive production, our offense isn't built to be as firepower as it was, last year. And we won games last year with the defense. So both of those combined doesn't give me a good feeling unless the defense really shows out. And so that's really going to be the key for me. And I really don't know what to expect. Because of that, I'm kind of erring on the side of caution, which I think I talked about last week and said we would actually lose week 1. I think it can be competitive. I hope it's competitive. And I'm not putting money on it, but if I was, I think I would be going Razorbacks.
Bob, your thoughts on Luke Fickell traveling down to Fayetteville, Arkansas to face Sam Pittman and the Hogs?
He'll be traveling down there undefeated, but he will not be leaving there undefeated, and that's really the key for the Bearcats. I mean, when you're relying on Eastern Michigan retreads to start for the program, that really says what you're raising in-house and how much of your success may have been tied to the second round. What was it, second round selection, Desmond Ritter, or end of the first?
I think he went in the third. He dropped to the third.
Third, man. I mean, dropping like a stone in water. But anyway, I mean, when you really have to rely on transfer, I mean, it was in your program, but couldn't hack it. You had to go to, and then had to transfer to Eastern. Oh boy. And then come back.
Hold on a second. Couldn't hack it behind the guy who led us to the CFP it's not that much of an indictment.
Yeah, but if he could hack it, why would he be leading Eastern Michigan to like 4 wins and like 6 wins in the MAC?
Because Eastern Michigan's roster is trash. So what was he supposed to do?
Rocky Lombardi transferred to Northern Illinois and won like the MAC. I mean, come on now. I mean, he was the retread at MSU. So I mean, which is not supposed to be his story. I mean, as a program right now, as Cincy is maybe, but.
It's more storied. I mean, I'm not gonna say the UC program is storied. We just had a good year.
I mean, well, and it might just be that a good year and right down the tube because
I hope that's incorrect.
Here's the thing. I think I'll settle down here for a second and look at the realistic scenario for UC. I mean, this guy, Ben Bryant, his name. I apologize.
Yeah, that's right.
Ben Bryant.
Yeah, good job.
He's good enough to hack it against ECU. I mean, that, and, USF or UCF or, whatever.
USF also.
USF. Maybe he's good enough to hack against the Green Wave, too. But, because those teams are like Akron. Those are like Akron, like Toledo. I mean, that's like who he's playing. I mean, that's who Cincinnati's playing. So, this will probably be like their one or two. This would maybe be their one loss of the season. But, Ben Bryant, I hope he shows up. I hope he shows out. But could be a quick sheep hook on him if he looks like a disaster, all I'm going to say. But it will be a raucous environment. The good word for it is down there in Arkansas. And, maybe he's been there, done that. But I guarantee you playing down in Zippy in Akron is not the same as playing down in the Deep South and playing Arkansas. I'll tell you that much. So I think
it's also not playing Colorado State.
That's true. Michigan's just known for scheduling patsies, but that's what it is.
Incorrect. This is like the first time. This is like the first time in like 70 years Michigan has not had a Power 5 non-conference opponent. So I'm
and then they're like 0-100. They're like 0-100 in those games too. So but here's the thing: what we're focused on Cincinnati.
How does it make you feel that UC has two Power 5 non-conference opponents?
That's good for UC, but it doesn't really do anything if you guys lose and miss out on the college football playoff. So,
well, we haven't lost yet.
Well, that's true. Who's the other guy that they're deciding between, Dennis? What's his name?
Evan Prater.
Fourth game of the season, I'm predicting Evan Prater's now at the helm of the Bearcats. That's my early take. I don't think that the EMU 7th year super senior is going to be able to lead you guys to the promised land. So, sorry, Ben.
To at least give Michigan a little bit, because I'd like to see us play a Power 5 conference opponent just as much as anyone else. We had UCLA scheduled for this year and next year, but since they're coming in to the conference, it's sort of messed up those plans. And the home and home series that we were planning on starting with them. So to be fair, those games did exist at one point, and 2024 we start a home and home with Texas, I think, and I believe Oklahoma is a home and home to follow. So
hook 'em, baby, hook 'em.
Okay.
We may have like a top 5. We're like one of 5 teams. We're one of 5 Power 5 teams that do not have a Power 5 non-conference opponent this year. It's like Michigan, Indiana. There's 3 Big Ten teams. Maryland might have been the other one. But yeah, we'll get our due. Don't you worry. Other than that, I think that's pretty much everything I had wanted to talk about. If there's nothing else you guys had that was especially pressing, I say we get right into everyone's favorite segment that we all know and love, the Right Bench Baller. Dennis, have you come prepared with the Right Bench Baller, or will you need a couple minutes while me and Bob discuss ours?
I'm prepped. I found one. I found one right at the beginning, right after I hopped on, and you guys were finishing up NBA stuff. I said, let's go ahead and find our Right Bench Baller, and we found him. I'll go right into it. It is, and I hope I pronounced this correctly, Nick Pratto, a first baseman and left fielder for the Kansas City Royals. And he has had a pretty solid week. He's been with the big league club since middle of July and has not done a whole lot. But in the last, 7 games, he's had 3 home runs, including a 2-home run game at the White Sox a couple days ago. A 2 for 4, a 3 for 5, a 1 for 4 in there. He's been racking up the hits, has a couple of RBIs in there as well. So my shout out this week is going to Nick Pratto of the Kansas City Royals. And then also just a random shout out to the Edgewood High School kicker from Trenton, Ohio, where I grew up just outside of Cincinnati, who today attempting a 28, 29-yard field goal horrible snap, fields it, doesn't panic, runs to the wide side of the field, gets the corner, and scores the touchdown on a dive at the pylon. And, the little kicker is going like absolutely berserk. It was an incredible moment. So shout out. I don't remember his name. I'm sorry. And I know nobody from years listen to this anyway.
Well,
incredible moment.
That was a beautiful moment, I'm sure, to witness in person. And once again, thank you for, being prepared on such short notice, since I know you're a very busy man. We do appreciate your diligence. Bob, you want to take the next one?
I do, and I'm gonna thankfully have one from my very own Michigan State Spartans this week. Got to get the college football in there when you can. None other than Jarek Broussard of the Michigan State Spartans this week, and transfer from Colorado, Mel Tucker's old stomping ground. And he was actually, early in his career, he was the Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year. Earlier in his career, when he was popping off, he's a running back. But today, he was the second string behind Berger today, and he had 10 carries for 54 yards today. No tubs. However, I just wanted to point out that when I watched this guy play, this guy popped off my screen every time that he got the ball in his hands. Now, sure, he didn't bust any long runs for touchdowns or anything like that. But every time this guy got the ball, this guy's, acceleration was unlike anything I've ever seen in the green and white uniform through one game. This guy hit the hole quick, and he's going to be one of those guys that just can be a home run hitter for us. He looked good. He looked good in the carries he had. He seemed to hit the hole quick, and he's not the biggest dude, so he's not really going to break too many tackles for you. But looked very, very solid in his outing, and I hope to see him get some more carries going down the line, because he looked extremely fast just from the eye test on TV. So Broussard, you're my man for this week. Keep up the good work. And, next week against Zippy, bust one for 90 yards for me.
And I'll wrap us up here. My right bench baller is actually going to go to an entire team. Bob probably knows where I'm going with this. I mentioned it right before we hopped on the air, because I couldn't not talk about this game, but without really having, a really good way to segment it into the regular talks, I figured I'd just make the entirety of the Old Dominion University Monarchs football team my right bench baller. They, for the second time in 4 years, beat Virginia Tech at Old Dominion to start the season. They won 20-17 tonight, scoring on a 1-yard touchdown run with 33 seconds left. And, just credit to Old Dominion for getting the job done. There were 7 total combined turnovers in this game, 4 interceptions thrown by Virginia Tech, and a fumbled field goal attempt snap where the ball was snapped so far behind the holder that Old Dominion recovered it for a 25-yard fumble return touchdown. The dude literally snapped it and the ball rolled for like 50 yards to the other side of the field. And Virginia Tech turned an easy chip shot field goal into 7 Old Dominion points. Old Dominion all time is 2-12 against Power 5 opponents. And those 2 wins have both come against Virginia Tech, who are there 2-2 against all time. So I think Virginia Tech should probably stop scheduling to play at Old Dominion and maybe have them go to Blacksburg perhaps, or maybe just stop playing Old Dominion in general because clearly it's not good for their program. So shout out to Old Dominion. First year, this is their inaugural year, and the FBS is a member of the Sun Belt Conference. And it's nice to see that other Power Five conference or other Power Five teams can lose to at least formerly FCS opponents. So yeah, shout out to Old Dominion. That was just too good of a story to not include with tonight's episode. Bob, take it away with Garbage Time Takes Your Money.
Correct, and I am getting that up right now. But I already know what game I want to do, and I think it's only right to start with this game. Pardon me, I'm reading this on my phone real quick.
Here, I'll give you a couple seconds to get yourself.
I've got her up right here, actually. Got it up right here.
You got it?
Got
Do
it
you
up right
want
here.
me to recap last week's GTT Your Money?
Yes,
first?
I do. I do want you to do that, though.
All right. So I'll give you another couple seconds here. So for those of you that remember last week, we started off with Nebraska and Northwestern playing in Ireland. The line at the time of our recording was minus 12.5 for Nebraska, and the over-under was set at 50.5 points. The three of us were a bunch of fools thinking that Scott Frost could go a full game without an epic blunder. For those of you who do not remember, when Nebraska went up 11 points in the third quarter, all the momentum on their side, Scott Frost, in his infinite wisdom, decided to attempt an onside kick. And the Northwestern promptly recovered it and ensued on a touchdown drive, and Nebraska never recovered. So thank you, Scott Ice Cold Frost, for another choke job and for costing our precious viewers money because you failed to score a single point in the fourth quarter. That score ended up being Northwestern 31, Nebraska 28. So the over hit. So me and Dennis hit the over and go 1 for 2. Bob, unfortunately, goes 0 for 2 after taking the under and Nebraska. Bob, take it away.
I think that it's only right with college football starting up to hit this game. None other than the Fighting Irish and Notre Dame at Ohio State. Now, I'm assuming this is taking place at the Shoe. There's no overseas in Ireland, business for this one, which actually should have been the game that they played in Ireland. Now that I think about it, given that it was the Fighting Irish, but
correct.
Whatever. But at Ohio State.
But yes, this game will be in Columbus. Don't you worry.
This is a domestic game.
Thank you. Current line is Ohio State minus 15.5 points, and minus 820 for the Bucks, and over under set at 59.5 points. This is, tomorrow primetime game. Dennis, minus 15.5 Ohio State, over under 59.5. What are you feeling for the matchup of the weekend between the top 5 schools?
Yeah, this is the one everyone's tuning into, right? I figured we didn't cover it in the regular segments because I kind of just assumed this would be our Garbage Time Takes Your Money, and so waited to preview it a little bit here. I don't know a lot about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish coming into the season. I know they have former UCD coordinator Marcus Freeman at the helm, and that's been a change. And it seems to be, I think I saw an interview with him that ESPN did the other day. Things seem to be going smoothly with that transition. I guess we'll find out as he enters this season. But 15.5 is a lot for, the preseason. Was it 2 and 5? Is that right? Ohio State is 2 and Notre Dame's 5. And obviously the people who are putting together these preseason rankings, it's going to change a lot. But I like to think that they know more than me, or they can at least give me a direction to start thinking about these teams as they enter the season. And so for two teams of that caliber, 15.5, even at the Horseshoe, I want the plus 15.5. I want the plus 15.5 with Notre Dame. I just don't see how this turns into a massive blowout. I think it turns into a blow for blow. And, given that, sure, Ohio State's probably the favorite to win for a reason, but minus 810. Oh, that's just. I mean, that is some insanity right
Plus
there. I'm not
550
touching
for
with
Notre
it.
Dame right now. Plus 550.
I'm not touching minus 810 with a 20-foot pole. So give me the 15.5, and then over under is always tough. But if we've seen anything out of this first couple of college football games to start the season, it's been a lot of scoring. So I'll go with the over. It worked for me last week when I took the over in Northwestern Nebraska. So we'll roll with it. We'll go over, and then give me Notre Dame with the 15.5.
Dennis, are you bold enough to take Notre Dame and the points, or are you just going to take them to cover?
Oh, you mean take Notre Dame money line?
Yes. I was wondering if you were that bold or if you were just going to take them to cover.
I don't know if I'm that bold. I mean, Here's the thing, though. The reason that I actually would be that bold is because it's plus 5. What'd you say? 5 something?
550.
I mean, 550. I'll just bring a couple bucks on plus 550 in Notre Dame. Like I'm not going to put my mortgage on it, but like with those odds, sure. Why not? Take a shot at it. I don't think that they deserve to be that much of an underdog. So I'm more confident with the points with the 15.5. But if you don't want to do that and you just want to say, Notre Dame is good enough and this is too close of a matchup to be putting money on the -1 or 810, then yeah, throw a few bucks on Notre Dame and, maybe a few bounces go your way.
Bob, you want me to take it next, or do you want to?
I guess I'll go. I think that I have a hard time seeing the under hitting on this one. I just think I think that personally Ohio State will score too many points for the under to hit reasonably. If Notre Dame shows up at all, so I think I'm going to go with the over, like Dennis. Now, the spread is actually the tougher part for me personally, because I can see a world where Ohio State just blows the brakes off of Notre Dame and it gets ugly, and it gets ugly very, very quick. But that is over 2 scores, that the spread is. I think I'm like Dennis. I think I want the plus 15.5. I gotta believe that Notre Dame, who I've always had a soft spot for personally, will cover the 15.5 points.
What kind of MSU fan has a soft spot for Notre Dame?
Me. And so, and you know what? And I also have a soft spot for Notre Dame because I had no way want Ohio State to get any sort of extra wins that they possibly can, because that only helps our chances of MSU being successful this year. And I'd love nothing more to see Ohio State wet the bed to Notre Dame or to us for that matter. So I think I'll take the 2 tubs for Notre Dame and pray that they come through for me. Thank you, Fighting Irish.
As always, and a surprise to absolutely nobody, I'm taking the over. Ohio State's probably going to have a top 3 offense in the entire country this year on a pure numbers standpoint. First-round talent across the board. And like you said, Bob, if Notre Dame even scores like 13 points, then the over should hit relatively comfortably. Ohio State bringing in Jim Knowles, former Oklahoma State defensive coordinator, after Michigan ran all over them last year.
Not encouraging. Not encouraging when you got to go to the Oklahoma State well to
Correct.
play defense. That's all I got to say.
A lot of people, regard Jim Knowles as some defensive guru since Oklahoma State had a decent defense in the Big 12. My response to that would be, just because nobody plays defense in the Big 12 doesn't really mean much when your defense happens to be slightly above average. That's just the way I see it. Regardless, Jim Knowles could be the best defensive mind in college football history, but in week 1, new team, new scheme, I don't think it clicks quite that, easily right off the jump. So I think there's going to be a lot of points to be scored. So give me the over. I think that'll hit relatively easily. And I am not only going to take Ohio State on the money line, but I'm taking them to cover. I have zero respect for Notre Dame. And until they prove otherwise that they deserve my respect, then I'm going to just assume that the only reason they're ranked top 5 is so that the College Football Playoff Committee could have a top 5 matchup to start the season. Marcus Freeman, I think he's got, what it takes to be a really good coach at this level. But under Brian Kelly, it always just felt like Notre Dame squeaked by mediocre opponents. And whenever they had to play someone who was truly elite, they got exposed. And in one off season, I don't think Notre Dame's going to be able to compete at that level. So I'm going to take the OSU cover and, of course, the over.
Fair enough.
But should be a really good game. I'm certainly going to watch it. I'm going to have a long day of watching college football tomorrow. Michigan, for me, starts at 9. Then UC, for me, is at 12:30. And then I get Ohio State, Notre Dame at like 4:30. So full college football action-packed Saturday for yours truly. Certainly looking forward to it. And with that, Bob, I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up. So hit the people with our socials and remind them of where they can find us.
Correct. At Garb Time Takes on Twitter, at Garbage Time Takes on Instagram, at Garbage Time Takes right here on YouTube, and you can find the link to our website where we post all of our videos and articles down in the description of this video.
Thanks for that again, Bob. If you guys out there in the audience decide to hop on the website, I don't know, around like 1 o'clock in the morning, perhaps there may be an article from yours truly about a Michigan football recap. Maybe if Dennis finds some time in his, absolutely chaotic, exhaustive work schedule, maybe he gives a little UC Arkansas recap, Perhaps we'll see Bob talk about and expand a little bit more on his thoughts that he gave in this podcast and article. We'll see, not making any guarantees, but you'll never know if you don't check out the website. Check out some of our other articles. Been producing some pretty good stuff lately, in our opinion. So with that, thank you so much for watching. We will see you for next week's episode that I will be sure to ask Dennis beforehand of when he will be available to ensure that I do not inconvenience him. And with that being said, in 3,
2,
1.
Peace.
Peace.